All right, so we're back. So as promised, I have taken the water that we made in our previous series of videos, and I have incorporated it into this sort of volcanic rocky terrain. And we're going to do this, and what it's going to teach us, well, it's going to teach us a bunch of things, but not least of which is how to begin to create your own library of materials and masks and, well, anything really. I mean, you can do functions, anything you use on a regular basis or would like to reuse, you can actually store within the library of Substance. And it's a pretty straightforward thing to do. So in here, I have my materials, and these are things that I've made and that I use, and I have them organized through the use of filters. So we're going to take a look at how to do this. It's actually really straightforward. But I thought before that we would take a look at this is this giant sort of it's incredibly large and confusing as it stands right now, because all of these blue groups here, each one of these, by saving it to the library, this hot mess turns into, each one of these turns into a node. So this will be represented by a node. This will be represented by a node, all the way down the line. So immediately that's going to cut off half of this. And then the other great thing is that once I've done this once, I can reuse it over and over and over again. So these are here, these aren't actual, I mean, this is our water right over here. So this is the full material, but it doesn't have to be all of these outputs. It can just be one or two outputs. In fact, what we're going to do before we look at making the library is we're going to take care of this little guy right here. This is the simplest of the maps that we've got for this material. And this defines the difference between the water and the ground. And that's all it does. We have it set up so that there are some there's a couple of exposed parameters, and those are going to allow us to set the jaggedness of this shoreline, as well as the sharpness or gentleness of the slope between the water and the ground. So you can, right now in this example here, I have it set at 0, so this is pretty much like a little cliff thing happening, or we could have it as a gentle slope. And again, these are parameters that we're going to bake into something that's going to come out looking like a node, and we're going to be able to either manipulate them in here and then just export it after we've adjusted it how we want for that particular material that we're going to be using it for, or we can choose to re-expose them and then have them actually come out in the final material over here. Wow, that's big. At the end, that can be manipulated actually in the game engine itself. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to make a new substance. Instead of using the PBR setup, I'm just going to go and do it empty, because I mean, you could, but then you end up erasing all, well, you would have to do all of them and then change one of them to a mask, just start fresh. So we're going to call this ledge relative to parent. Okay, so we end up with an empty graph, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a node, output node. This is going to be our mask. And we'll call it mask. And we're going to make it a mask. All right. So now we need a noise. The noise that I chose was Grunge 001. And this is going to be the basic sort of form that's going to define, you know, what's shoreline, I mean, what's water and what's land. So what I need to do to this first, I'm going to put a blur in here. This is going to be, eventually we're going to expose this blur. If you look at the original, this is where we're going to get our edge jaggedness from. So I'm going to bring this way down. It's not going to be a big number. I think in my notes I have it set as 0.45 as the default. Again, we can always change that later. Now, in order to get this to look more like a shoreline, we want to get rid of some of these gray values in here. We want it much more sort of black and white. So I'm going to bring in a levels node, and I'm going to adjust the levels so it does that. So let's get more white, and then let's get rid of some of that gray. Okay. I don't want to get too carried away because it starts looking kind of, I don't know, icky. I prefer kind of doing this. I don't know if it's a hack or what, but this will make it stronger. All I'm doing is I'm going to multiply it by itself a couple of times. Multiply. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to do it again. And so if you look at this one in here compared to this first one that we started with, you're getting more contrasty, but it seems to me it keeps more of the subtlety this way. I don't know, it's just me. You could just leave it, you could do it just here. And then I'm going to bring in another blur now, except this blur, we've set the, by blurring this guy in and out. So let's bring it up to, I don't know, 5. This becomes much smoother. I mean, look at how much smoother that is, right? So that's what you're handling in this one. So let's bring this back to 0.45. And then what we're doing with this guy is we're going to adjust that slope of the edge. So once we've established what this edge is with that first blur, we're going to make that blur either smoother or sharper according to, you know, so this is where your edge slope is going to be. So I initially had this set to 0. We can leave it at 0, but again, we're going to expose it so we can look at it in the game. And that's it, because this guy is going to be our final mask, and this is what we are going to export out just like we would any other material. But first, let's expose these parameters. Might as well do it all now. So like we said, we're going to have what I'm calling ledge smoothness. Smooth. And we're going to call that smoothness. And then we're going to call the group ledge. And we'll have the default as 0.45 is what I have in my notes. But we'll have the maximum at 10. So it'll give people an opportunity to have sort of much smoother, you know, if it's more cartoony, you might want a smoother edge. You might not want it quite so jagged. And then for the other one, let's just actually make the parameters first, and then we're going to have ledge slope. And we'll call this slope, and the group will be ledge. And then this default, well, what I have in the example is set at 0. So that this is like a cliff face, and then the further up this goes, the smoother that gradient's going to be. And I had the maximum set at 20. So you can have very, very, very sort of shallow slope if you want to set it that way. So let's expose these parameters. So this intensity, I'm going to call this ledge smooth. And this guy, I'm going to call it ledge slope. And that's it. It's done. So we can go ahead. Where are we? There we go. So we can save it. Now, instead of saving it to the Unity project as I was doing before, we are in a folder within my art called Substance Library. And this is all on an external drive because I learned a lesson a long time ago that it's probably a good idea to keep your precious art stuff on something that is not quite so prone to hardware mishap. I've created a folder in here for demos. And so we're going to create a new subfolder. Let's call it ground. Okay. And again, you can organize these however you want. And I'm going to save this file to here. And then just for kicks, let's publish it out to the same file as well. So again, oh, this is, I have to go back to so now I'm creating a subspar or whatever, whatever, the archived version. So I'm going to, a substance archive here, SBSAR file. All right. So we're just going to put that in the same folder. All right. So we're ready to take a look at how to make a library. The first thing we need to do is we need to go to our preferences. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. What we're going to look at right now is projects. And there's a lot of stuff in here as well. But in a nutshell, the way Substance works is, notice how I have one of these highlighted. And depending on which one you have highlighted, different information is going to be showing up in here related to the project that you currently have highlighted. So with your user project highlighted, go to library. And in here, well, I already have it, I've created a path to my library. So basically, if you want to make a new one, well, we can just make a new one for demos, okay? You go here, you pick the folder that you want, select your folder, and now it's created a path. And you have to do this in order to have these things show up in your library. So let's apply this and take a look. Now, there it is. So here, I mean, it's just kind of been dumped in there. It's got the basic. Where's my? I mean, right now it's just looking in here, and so it's doing a search for that particular word in this particular folder. Lucky for us, we don't have a bunch of stuff. You know, you know, if you've got one or two things, it's not a problem. But you'd really prefer to have this organized in a much more better way, which is what we're going to do now. The first thing we want to do is we want to go. It doesn't really matter which file within the folder you want to search by, because all you're going to be doing is going to the properties and just just copying your path, because we're going to search by path. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow us to create subfolders within the library system here where we're searching by path. So let's start. I already had a folder here, demos. Let's just remove it. So we can start from the beginning. Okay, this is the one that I have for my materials. So I have this, I can search, look at all my materials, or I can break it up, or I can do like a separate search. You can also favorite them, and this will bring it up into your favorites library. So all of these things that you're saving to this library that you've made will get treated just like all the stuff that comes native with Substance. So let's make a new folder. So I come up here, I click Add Folder. It's going to create a new folder. So let's call this Demos. Now, once I have this folder, I can then add filters to that folder. And it's essentially like, well, it could be for anything. In this particular case, we're going to create a filter that will go by the subfolders that we've created within our actual file system. So again, now we've got a filter here. I can call this filter grounds, so I know what it's for. So this is just going to reflect what I have going on in that filing system. And again, you can narrow this, so you could have it only show up bitmaps or only show up favorites, or any one of these things. So you can get pretty specific with your searches. Again, this is searching by something, so you can have a base name, description, author, yada yada yada. We're going to do URL, which is where that comes in. So we've picked up from properties here, we've picked up the location of that folder. So that's why anything in here, as long as you're within that folder, you just pick a file, any file. And that gives us the correct path to put in here. And that's it. And you can get more specific with it, so you can stack them. So now I have no search terms up here. Well, there's no difference now because it's only got the one thing in it. But this automatically will, once we start getting more subfolders going on in here. In fact, let's take care of that now. We've got that piece of water that we had from the previous example, which I actually have opened up in here. So let's go here. And let's just go to water, and we can save it. Oh, well, I'm going to right click, I'm going to save as. Except now I'm going to make a new subfolder in here for liquids. Oh. And let's save it in here. And then we can also, while we're at it, publish it to the same folder. So we have both types of files in there. And we can close this guy now. So instead of having that whole big mess, we now have it as a very handy dandy, or we will in a moment once we create a new filter for it. So I'm back up in demos. Now you'll notice that even though we have this path, we don't have the path for the, so we're going to make a new filter is basically what I'm saying. Right, so again, I just right clicked, you can go up there, add filter. I'm going to call this liquids. We're going to do all. We're going to do, oh, we have to go collect. So we're going to go back here. We're going to go to liquids. We're going to go to one of these guys. We're going to go its properties. We're going to collect our path. I mean, you could type it in by hand, but this is easier. And we're going to say URL contains our file path. And there's our water. So now you can see that we've got two different things going on here. And then if you go to the root, it's going to show up everything within that root. And we have different kinds of versions of what we made here. We have just we have the compiled graph, which shows up in green, which we're not going to use when we're going to drag it in. We're going to drag in this guy, which is just the regular old graph. And then this, with the letter S, is your SBSAR file. And again, we can add these to favorites. So that's it. This material that we made with our very own little hands in Explorer, right here, this little guy right here, is now something that we can use in every single thing that we make in the future. And we've just saved ourselves having to go through this rigmarole every single time we want to have something like this. So we're going to end this video here, and then for the next couple of videos, we're going to just make some more of these things that we're going to put in our library, and probably a couple more, a couple, 3. And we will then put them all together to make that final material with all its glorious color and moving water and adjustable foam and all that other stuff, because you can also move the size of the foam, so you can get like bigger foam, which is this foam we added to the water that we had. So I thought since we had rocks, we should really just sort of add a little bit of sort of edge foam to that, which kind of makes the water look a bit nicer. But again, it's the same basic water. All we're doing is we're dragging in from our library the water. We're not going to use as much of it as we did the last time, but it's going to be there for us. So whatever information we want to take from it, we can just pick and choose what we want from our library.